Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. If we can go to the next slide, Stephanie. Great. So hi everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our panel presentation for foreign national candidates. My name is Rick Kempinski, and I am the Fellowship Operations Director at Activate. In my role, I work to ensure a positive fellowship experience across our Activate communities, including Berkeley, Boston, New York City, and our Activate Anywhere community. Activate welcomes applications from foreign nationals, but we know it can be a big challenge obtaining a visa. We try to support foreign nationals as best we can through the application and selection process. And this year, we have decided to conduct this webinar in order to highlight some pathways to begin exploring in order to successfully become an Activate Fellow. So the aim of this panel is to support foreign national applicants through the application and selection process, present various pathways of obtaining a visa in order to participate as an Activate Fellow, hear from 4 of our current and alumni Activate Fellows who've been through the experience of obtaining a visa, and then get general fellowship questions answered during a brief Q&A session at the end of our panel discussion. I'm hoping that this information that you learned today will help you make the most informed decision as you consider the Activate Fellowship. As a reminder, applications are due October 31st, only a few weeks away. Next slide. I will begin providing you all with a high-level overview of common visa types and potential pathways to explore as you consider applying to the Activate Fellowship. Next, we'll have our panel of current and alumni fellows introduce themselves and share their journey and experience to obtain a visa. Finally, we'll open it up to participant questions to the panelists. So feel free to put any questions in the chat feature at any time during the conversation. I'll be monitoring this for panelists, and we'll get to them during the Q&A session. At that time, you can also come off of mute during the Q&A session to ask your question directly to the panelists. And then finally, if you don't get to your question today or you have a question that comes up later, please feel free to reach out to us after the panel if you have any questions then. You can always email apply@activate.org with your questions later at any time. So let's begin. Next slide, please. So in this section, I'll share some common visa types with you all. Please note that this is not an exhaustive list and everyone's situation is unique to their own background. So we encourage you to research additional visa types that may better fit your needs. So on our website, we provide frequently asked questions from foreign national candidates. I'm not going to read this all to you, but we'll highlight several items and encourage you to visit activate.org to get more details. So number 1, Activate cannot hold, sponsor, or petition for fellow work visas. Why? Because Activate Fellows are actually not employees of Activate and therefore cannot be on an employment visa through us. Number 2, you do have time to obtain a visa. We ask that you work towards obtaining your visa by the start of the fellowship, which is usually June 1st of every year. Number 3, we encourage you to have a plan. We want you to have a plan. Throughout the selection process, you will be asked as a foreign national candidate what your plan is for obtaining a visa for the duration of your fellowship. It's important for you to begin coming up with that plan as soon as possible, and hopefully this conversation will help you begin to explore the right pathway for you. But note, if your plan does fall through, you would not be able to move forward as an Activate Fellow. So this is very important that you're here. Number 4, although Activate is open to foreign nationals, we do have some of our partners who may have some restrictions to use their labs or some citizenship requirements that are out of our control. Next slide. In this chart, we've highlighted some common visa types. Number 1 is the F1 Optical Practical Training, or OPT. Eligible students can apply to receive up to 12 months of OPT employment authorization before completing their academic studies and or after completing their academic studies. Certain F1 students who receive a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree may apply for a 24-month extension of their post-completion optional practical training. Number 2 is the exchange visa, visitor, or J visa, which are non-immigrant visas for individuals approved to participate in exchange visitor programs in the United States. Please note that the J1 does have a requirement to return to the country of origin at the end of the visa. The O1 visa is for the individual who possesses extraordinary ability in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. And then the H1B is this classification applies to people who wish to perform services in a specialty occupation, services of exceptional merit and ability relating to a Department of Defense cooperative research and development project. One that we did not list on here also is a TN visa. The TN permit qualifies Canadian and Mexican citizens to seek temporary entry into the United States to engage in business activities at a professional level. So that's because of the NAFTA agreement. That is what that visa is for. So if you are from Canada or Mexico, I would encourage you to look at that as well. So Activate also continues to research and share resources for foreign nationals who wish to obtain permission to work as entrepreneurs. One example includes the Global Entrepreneur in Residence program, or Global EIR. This program enables the world's most innovative entrepreneurs to continue to choose the United States as the best place to build their businesses and create jobs by partnering with universities to connect international entrepreneurs with visas and provide support. However, this is only available to those selected for our Activate Boston community because we only have one university partnership at this time with the University of Massachusetts. And I think you'll likely hear more about this pathway from one of our panelists today. Again, this is not a comprehensive list of visas, and we encourage you to research pathways that align with your particular background and situation. Next slide. Great. So we've asked several of our current and alumni Activate fellows who are successful in their efforts to obtain a visa for the duration of their fellowship to speak with you today. They'll each have about 7 to 10 minutes to discuss their own personal journey and experience through the process, provide any advice that they would give to those starting out in their efforts in obtaining a visa, and how to work with Activate on coming up with a plan that I mentioned earlier. And number 3, share any resources that they identified that may be helpful to you in your research. Feel free again to put any questions at any time as they speak, and we'll get to them at the Q&A session. Next slide. Well, here they are. We're excited to be joined today with our 4 Activate fellows in alphabetical order. We have Miguel Sierra Aznar, who was on our cohort 2018, Anindita Banerjee, who is in our cohort 2020, Assam Alsawi, who is in our current cohort 2022, and then Flores Engelhardt, who's from our cohort of 2021. So I'm going to turn it over to them now, and I'm going to start with Miguel. Miguel, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Rick. Yes, just as Rick just said, I'm Miguel, co-founder and CEO of North Thermodynamics. I was cohort 2018 for Activate. An honor for obviously all of you. Good luck in getting an Activate fellowship is something that is life-changing. In terms of what we do as a company, we are working into the decarbonization of the electric grid through dispatchable, clean, and efficient power generation plants. Now, to the point of today, which I think the most important part is visa. So yes, I'm originally from Spain. I think there is I actually do have questions to Rick, and I'm sure many people on the call may have questions to Rick, which is you're asking for visas, and I'm wondering if the potential candidates get admitted, do they then get a visa, or do they then need to get a visa, or they need to have the visa before actually getting admitted in the fellowship? Because that's a very important key aspect. So I hope you can maybe answer that question, Rick.
Yeah, so you should have a plan of how you're going to have obtain a visa for the duration of the fellowship. So if you are working towards that, you should have a plan of that starting on June 1st of 2023. So if you're on one and plan to switch to another visa type, that can be part of your plan, but that you should have that as your plan. But you should have a visa by June of 2023.
Right. Okay. So that's based on that. Now I can a little bit maybe give a little bit of my experience, because I think I'm fortunate. I mean, compared to many of you, I saw in the chat, many of you said you are talking from India, you are talking to us or joining this call from outside of the United States, and that makes the challenge of getting a visa way harder. I think in my case, I'm a UC Berkeley graduate. I did my PhD at UC Berkeley, so I had an OPT F1. Right after that, I did a postdoc at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and there are many visas that you have to be very careful, because although they're just there in the list, you don't qualify to those visas. So there are certain conditions. So OPT doesn't allow you to be self-employed. So you cannot be self-employed under an OPT. And therefore, you need a sponsor, mentor, institution that is mentoring you. So for example, when I was an OPT doing my postdoc, to enter the fellowship, I had to quit my OPT and change visa. So the way to change visa, and I think that's my biggest suggestion to many of you that need a plan coming outside the US, is a J1. J1 is fairly straightforward. If you're highly qualified, most likely PhDs. And then the sponsoring institution for your J1 will most likely be the national lab you will be hosted by. And that is why the question is very important to know. Do you know whether you got into the Activate program before or after you need to get your visa? because if you get qualified for Activate before you apply for your visa, then you can use literally that fellowship as your source of a sponsorship to justify to the national lab why they should sponsor your visa, because you are financially sponsored by Activate, and that makes your life very easy. There are other challenges with that, and I will add that certain countries, I come from Spain, so thankfully Spain doesn't have the 2-year mandatory return back to your country. Other countries do have it. I believe India has it, in which case, if you are in a J1, after 2 years, you will have to return. Or I don't know if it's after 2 years, or after so many years, you will have to return for 2 years back to India or back to your home country. And that, again, depends on country to country basis. So I think look into that. So back to my journey, I was on a J1 through my Activate Fellowship. And then when I decided to go into, when the Activate Fellowship ends, and if you want to stay in the United States, then the things becomes a little more complicated, because for the J1, you need to still be sponsored by someone, and that cannot be your own company. So that actually adds a lot more trouble to securing a continued employment within the United States. So by then, I think my suggestion, and that's just beyond even the application, is to make sure you have a board of directors that is above you, and then you qualify what is called the H-1B for entrepreneurs, which means you can be an entrepreneur, but you still have to be employed or employable by some sort of employer, and that employer in your case is going to be your board of directors, who have the power to fire you as a CEO or founder of the company. So that those aspects are very important to have in mind. So you may want to think who is on your board. You may want to think when to build that board, so that you can switch, in this case, from a J1 to an H1. So there's many challenges. Right now, I myself, I'm on an H1, and obviously I decided of my board. And yeah, I think in terms of visas, there's a lot of challenges around. I'm happy to answer a lot of questions along the way, but I think I'm going to let the other fellows maybe touch upon the topic. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Miguel. Anindita, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Rick. Hi, everyone. My name is Anindita. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Resource Chemical. I was an Activate Fellow from 2020 to 2022. So when I joined the fellowship, I was in my second year of STEM OPT. So before that, I was a postdoc at Stanford, a grad student followed by a postdoc. So when I was a postdoc, the first year of OPT and the first year of the STEM OPT extension was spent there. And when I joined the fellowship, I was in my second year of the extension, or the third year, like in that full, 3-year period. So like Miguel said, you have to change the host changes. So before I joined the fellowship, it was Stanford University who was the host, and then I had to change that to Resource, because I was employed at Resource at that point of time. And then second year into my fellowship, I switched to, or I applied for and got a O1 visa. And again, those like the petitioner was Resource, my company. And that's the visa that I'm also currently on, like after, my fellowship has ended, but I'm still continuing with the O1 visa. And something that, Miguel touched upon is you have to have, like if you're, I got an O1 visa and the company had to petition for me. So they want to make sure that even as a CEO, I'm fireable. So I had to have a board where, there was where I had another director. So it was, luckily for me, it was all set. Like I had my co-founder, who's my PhD advisor, academic co-founder. So we both were on the board, and it was easy to show that, yeah, I could be fired. And that's what they want to, see as a, that you fulfill that criteria. And so the transition for me was seamless in that aspect. I would like to point out how Activate tried to, how they, knowing my situation, how they tried to help me. If Rick, tell me if later on you want to touch upon this, so I can talk about it later, or I can cover it now.
Yeah, you can cover it now. That'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. So when I got into the fellowship, then I had 1 year was secured, and it was uncertain what the next step would be. Like I was so what they did is they worked with a immigration attorney for one of their staff members who they connected me to, but it looked like when I spoke to this person, she was very knowledgeable and all, but she hadn't worked on a O1 visa before her experience or expertise with H1B visa, and which would have been difficult for me because our company didn't have any funding at that point of time. And for a H1B visa, it's important that your company has to, like, they have to sponsor, whereas for a O1 you can your company has to petition, but you can self-sponsor. You can be the person who who's paying for the visa application and the visa process. So the attorney that they connected me with, like, she was really helpful, but like she didn't have quite the expertise that would be useful for my case. So that didn't quite work out. And then their HR, Lisa, connected me to another second attorney. And at the same time, I was also talking to different other immigration firms that I got referred to. So based on that, I chose to work with a particular firm, not with these two individuals that Activate connected me to. But they also, because I was a fellow at Activate Berkeley, which meant like we were looking to work at LBNL, and within the first few months of the fellowship program, I was already an affiliate at LBNL. So Activate set up a call with the LBNL, team who deals with their visa and everything, to see if LBNL could do something. And the option that they came up with was the J1 visa, and that wasn't very. Again, it didn't seem like it was the best option for me, because I'm from India, so it would mean probably going back or getting a waiver, which is like complicates the process and everything. So yeah, I didn't choose to go with that path as well. So I worked with an immigration firm to file an O1A visa. This was somewhere I was in my first year, like probably December, of 2020. But then to file an O1 visa, you require recommendation letters, and the ex-CEO of Activate, Ilan, he was one of he wrote for me one of the letters from, you require dependent and independent, letters, and he wrote one for me. So that was very helpful. And then for the O1 visa itself, again, wasn't very straightforward for me. So I applied and I got an RFE. And the bone of contention for the officer who was looking into my application was that our legal company address was my co-founder's home address, whereas we were saying we are working from LBNL. So what's the deal? Like, so they were, so they wanted further explanation on that. And just to clarify this, the director of the Cyclotron Road division at LBNL, Rachel Slayberg, at that point of time, she wrote me, she wrote a very detailed letter, and also the managing director at the Activate Berkeley site, even he wrote a letter kind of explaining, and it got my application got cleared. So Activate really tried, like from the first day onwards, they tried to see in which all way they could help or make connections so that I could start these discussions early. So in a nutshell, that's kind of my story, but happy to answer any questions that you have.
Great, thanks, Anindita. Unfortunately, Assam isn't here right now, so hopefully you can join us in a little bit, but I'm going to turn it over to Flores to go next. So Flores, over to you.
Hi everyone. My name is, as you just heard, Flores. I'm CEO, co-founder of Cano Therapeutics. We're a biotech startup. We basically make replacement parts for the human genome. I was a postdoc when I applied for the Activate Fellowship. And I think I would spend a lot of time thinking about how can I go through the maze and get you guys a more structured idea of what would a decision tree look like. So let's say most of us are in academia when they think about it, because it's your PhD project or your postdoc project. So I'm just going to wrap that up. If you are, you basically have the decision tree, am I a student or am I not a student? If you're a student, you can go for OPT. If you're not a student, so if you're a postdoc, you cannot do that. I was a postdoc, OPT fell out of the realm. As a postdoc, you have two options. You are on a J1 most of the time. That doesn't help you much. So you can decide for, do I want to go for an O1 or do I want to go for an H1B? So for an O1, you should have a couple like of publications ready. You need to show that you already have scientifically something out there. If you have been a postdoc, like after your PhD, if you have been a postdoc for a couple of years, that should be a way to go. That should be straightforward. My problem with that part was I actually applied, like I took a technology out of my PhD in Germany, and then I was a postdoc for not even a year in the middle of a pandemic. So I had publications for my PhD, but I didn't have any publication for my postdoc, where that would have been hard to get like an O1 through. So for me, the idea was, okay, that means I need to think about an H1B. The good thing about an H1B is it's a dual intent visa. What does that mean? It means that everyone on an H1B can officially say, I want to get like continuously work in the US. I want to be an immigrant. Whereas on a J1, we all know we always have to say we want to go back into our home countries. That's the official part, the story that you have to tell. H1B therefore is a good way. Now let's, no OPT, no O1. Now H1B, what options do you have? There again, you have two options. H1B lottery or academic H1B. The H1B lottery is something that everyone should try who wants to go for an H1B. Also, I tried it just on the side. It's an easy application. You go into lottery, but it is capped, meaning it has earned about 70,000. I think, don't quote me on the numbers, but it has only amount of H1B visas that are given out with each round of lottery cycle. If you don't get in, you don't get an H1B. Now, that is tough if you want to start a company and you want 100% chance of getting your visa and working. So that's when I decided, okay, can I go for an academic H1B? What does that mean? You want to start a company, why would you go for an H1B that is academic? What you can do, and that's what Rick told about like the Boston chapter here, is there are universities out there that are looking for global entrepreneurs in residence. That means that you get a part-time position at the university and you have to do a couple of hours of work in the environment of the university. They want to bring entrepreneurs and they want to get their students interacting with industry. I taught some classes, I did some science communication workshops. So that's on that realm what I'm currently doing at the University of Boston as a global entrepreneur in residence as a part-time position. What does that give me? I got a visa sponsored from them. How does that work? They don't just want to give me money. No, like my company now sponsors the Venture Development Center at UMass Boston as part of the membership of the Venture Development Center. That money goes into the Venture Development Center, and the Venture Development Center therefore is allowed to hire me. It's a circle. However, the good thing here is that the academic H1Bs are not capped, meaning it's very expensive. You pay about $30,000 a year for it, so you have to get the money in the bank somehow. But it's basically 100%, close to 100% chance to get your visa and get started going. You have then 2 years to raise money, start the company, get your credentials ready, and then the next step for everyone else should be EB1 green card, and that's what you go for. And so where am I currently? I'm currently in the middle of the H1B process, working on my EB1 green card application, and that is very similar to what you just heard about. You need to get your reference letters in line with experts in the field that then can certify that you're the best person to just like stay in the country and run the business and be a researcher. One other thing that I have is I have a couple of links that I'm going to put in the chat for you guys. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you to everybody who participated. I want to open this up now to the audience for some questions. You can either put your question in the chat or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can come off of mute to ask your questions. But Thank you for everyone's great information so far, and I'm looking forward to other maybe other resources that you have to share from any other of the panelists. Either put on the chat or come off of mute as well. But it looks like we have a question for Anindita. Did you have to have a co-founder in order to be sponsored by Resource while on that final year of STEM OPT? And is there a way around it if you don't have a co-founder?
Yeah, definitely it made it easier because I had a co-founder. But is there a way around it? Yeah, but you have to have a board still. So you might not have a co-founder, but you still have to have a working board. And all that you have to show is that you're in a position where you can be fired, so a board can take that call. And so you have to have a working board for that. And there might be other ways as well, but this is all that I know of.
Great. We have a question. I'm not sure if anyone knows this. If we are Canadians living in Canada right now and had an H-1B before, I also think, Rekha, you mentioned that you have the TN visa option too. What's the panel's opinion on TN versus H-1B? I don't know if anyone on this panel has experience on that. I think I can always put you in touch with Assam later, who I think is Canadian. So he might have some insight into this later. I don't know if anyone on the panel has thoughts on that.
No, but I think we have a lot of Canadians in the Activate program, so I guess that should be able.
Yeah, Rekha, we can certainly follow up once you send an email to us, and we can follow up with you for sure. Rakesh has a question. Thank you, panelists, for your insights. I have a question for Floris. Can you apply for both H-1B visa types, lottery and academic, at the same time?
Yes.
Great. We have a question. Faculty of Boston, is it required to be enrolled into Lincoln Lab? You do not have to be enrolled into Lincoln Lab, is my understanding. I don't know if anyone Activate colleagues have any other information on
that. I do have information on that. You cannot. You're not a US citizen. Lincoln Lab is not going to take you because you, as far as I am, as my knowledge goes, Lincoln Lab, because it's a government institution, especially here in the Boston area, has high security requirements, and one of them doesn't take non-US citizens, I think. But you definitely can be in the Activate Boston cohort and not be part of the Lincoln Lab.
Just to provide extra clarification on that, we actually no longer have an agreement to automatically embed fellows in Lincoln Lab. We can still make connections to them, but as Floris just said, you must be a US citizen to work with them.
Great. And Floris, someone asked again if you could elaborate about getting H-1B academic visa.
Yeah, if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. I think so. I can tell you about my process. I applied as a global entrepreneur in residence at the VDC, actually prior applying to Activate or at the same time. And I went through the application process. I did everything, and then I got basically a letter of intent from them saying that as soon as my company is started and I am off the ground, they're willing to take me up into the program and sponsor my visa. And that is what I gave to Activate so that they knew that I have a plan moving forward. In terms of just general H-1B academic visa, there is more than the University of Massachusetts here in Boston. There are other GEIR programs. However, here in Boston, that's the biggest one. You need more information, please have a look in the links that I sent you, because there's a lot that goes on with it. Yeah. Or ask any specific questions. It's hard to answer. It's a lot. It's a process.
Yeah, one thing I might add on that from talking to other universities, this is Eva, I'm the fellowship manager for New York. Some universities do not permit you to work on other projects if you're on an H-1B for them. So if that's a pathway that you're considering, I would definitely suggest speaking with your university to understand whether that's a possibility for you as a first step, because not every university has the kind of EIR program that Flores is able to benefit from.
I will add,
Great.
if you don't mind, Craig, to Eva. There's a question, I think it's the same question about H-1B academics. So the beauty of that H-1B is that there's no lottery. So universities are exempt from the lottery, so they can apply it at any time. They're not kept. So if you happen to be working with a professor, you could be part-time postdoc with a professor and part-time with your company. And then your company can issue or request an H-1 visa, leapfrogging or jumping over the lottery limit. That's actually a really useful pathway.
Great. It looks like there's a question. It's kind of a general question for everyone. Can you talk about your application process for Activate? How much entrepreneurial work had you already undertaken before applying for the fellowship?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one on. I was just typing a response to that anyway. So let's see. So our application process, we've been accepting applications since September 15th. We will close the application portal on October 31st and we'll go into a staged review process. Anyone who applies can expect to hear back from us by December 21st on whether or not they'll be moving to interviews. We have a finalist event at the end of February, early March, for anyone who's selected as a finalist. And then we determine and offer fellowship slots to people by early April. So that's the timeline you're looking at. And then as far as kind of the experience level coming in, Activate is primarily for earlier stage companies. So we accept anything from an idea concept stage to, you can have a company, you can have employees, you can be established and start working, but we have a set of eligibility criteria that you can see on our website, reasons why you may be too far along, perhaps. And so some people, I would say, have some entrepreneurial experience and have kind of started down the path already. And we have had fellows that have come in at very early stages, essentially just kicking off their entrepreneurial journey when they start with us. I think that answers your question, but if not, feel free to let me know and I'll try again.
Great. Is there anything from the panelists who you want to share about maybe working with Activate to come up with a plan for your visa, like any advice you have on how best to do that throughout the selection process?
The best advice you can have is figure it out before. Just like have a plan before you apply. That's the best advice. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. And starting early, like it's never too early. Just to explore what options you have, the more the number of people that you can talk to, immigration firm, immigration attorneys, to explore your option, and the better it is. And the other thing, it's a maybe a lot of you already have have some kind of experience, but it's a time-consuming process, like preparing the application and then submitting it, and it can take months. So the earlier that you can start, the better it is.
I'm not sure if we answered this one. It's, does H-1B academic visa work for the Activate Fellowship? After the fellowship ends, do I have to change the visa type to H-1B non-academic or O1? I'm not sure if anyone knows the answer to that question.
I don't think I have the answer, but it's so specific that I recommend you find the answer on an attorney. Just if Rick hasn't said that already, I think disclaimer: this is not legal advice in this call.
yeah.
We're just giving you some experiences, so don't follow what we said to the penny. Just talk to an attorney, because these are really specific topics, and yeah, just be careful with how you do things.
Yeah, and I didn't say that, so thank you, Miguel, for making sure that we cover that. Again, any specific questions you have, you may have to talk to a lawyer for sure and get the right answer.
So I think one thing you can say to that question is that it seems like, Richard, you think that the academic visa is connected to the Activate Fellowship, which it is not. And so you could go for the academic visa without being an Activate Fellow. And you could stop being an Activate Fellow and still have the academic H-1B, but most programs have a timeline after which they kick you out.
I also think to make that point, to take that point home, Flores, and what Rick said at the very beginning of this call is, you are not an employee of Activate. Activate is just a financially sponsoring entity. So you have no relation whatsoever with Activate other than financial sponsorship. So your visa has nothing to do with Activate. And that is also important also, and this is getting ahead of what you guys need to know, but for tax purposes and income, you will have to have a different type of taxation and so on, because again, you are not related to Activate other than financially being sponsored, but your institution will be either the lab you work at, the university you work with, the company that sponsors your visa, and that in any case is never Activate.
And I think I can answer the question here for Rui Chang, which is if your supervisor is willing to sponsor my H-1B academic for my part-time position, does our startup still necessarily have to sponsor our university lab? I don't as far as I understand this question, no, because the sponsorship that I talked about is specifically for the VDC, to keep the VDC running here at UMass Boston. If you have a nice supervisor who is willing to do that and sponsor your H-1B, that is great. If that supervisor is a co-founder in your company, that person might run into conflict of interest with your university. So they should talk to their conflict of interest office immediately and see if that is even possible. That goes in line with what Eva said. What is important to know, even though your company then, if you have a nice university, nice professor that is willing to do that, doesn't need to sponsor money to the university, your company will still need to sponsor an H-1B for you. And I forgot to mention that earlier. So you've got the working permit for an academic H-1B, so you're allowed to work for the university. That does not mean that you're allowed to get employed by your company. You don't have a working permit to work for your company until your company files for a concurrent H-1B. And the concurrent H-1B is then kind of a top up of your academic H-1B. And that concurrent H-1B allows you to work at the company. And for that, you can then go back to the requirements that Anindita and Miguel talked about, where you need a board of directors or a co-founder or anyone who can fire you because you're not allowed to just sponsor your own visa.
Great, and there's a question in here about part-time. Does Activate allow part-time postdoc and part-time engagement in the program? And the answer is no. We want you to be spending time, full-time, on your company and developing that 100% of the time. Great, and I think I just answered that again. Someone just put that in the chat as well. Any other questions?
I think what I saw a lot here, and I think that's something for the Activate team, is a bit of, hey, I'm applying, now I get the fellowship, and then I go back to my home country and work from there. I don't know what the current rules are, but as far as I understood, the different, if you're not in the virtual cohort, you actually have commit of moving to the place where the cohort is. So Boston, Berkeley, New York. I think that is important. Can you clarify that again for anyone who's thinking they can maybe move around in the world?
Yeah, I mean, if you get selected for an in-residence community, you basically should be in that community, whether New York, Boston, Berkeley right now are in-residence communities. Activate Anywhere can be anywhere in the United States. Again, you have to register your company. You have to incorporate your company in the United States. So you would have to move to the United States either way to be part of this program. There's a question, if I'm joining a startup company instead of being an official founder, co-founder, am I still eligible for the program? No, you'd have to be a founder to be part of the program.
Rick, I can take this next one on the, in case the primary applicant couldn't get the visa, can a co-applicant join the program if he or she gets a visa or potentially is,
Right.
and the answer is yes, we do have some pairs where, for instance, we have what's called affiliate fellows, or plenty of our fellows have co-founders. So if you are founding a company with someone else, and part of your plan is maybe you'll both try for visa, try different pathways, you know, that's definitely possible, and the other person can basically continue to participate in the company in whatever way is possible for them with their work permissions. But so that's certainly a pathway to consider.
Thanks, Eva. Great. I feel like we've covered a lot of the questions. Is there any other ones that people have that we did not get to yet?
I wanted to ask Carla actually to assist on the co-applicant question, just to make sure I'm not offering bad advice. Carla, can you clarify if basically they would need to list the co-applicant at the time of application in order for that to be possible, or if a co-founder or can be added later in the process?
No. So in order to become a fellow, you have to go through our application and selection process. So if you wanted somebody to be considered for a funded fellowship slot, they would need to be a listed co-applicant on your application. I've made this point a few times, not in this meeting, but in other meetings, so I will say it here. There's roughly, I would say, a 50% chance that if you apply as a team, both of you will get funded. So it's possible that even if you applied as co-applicants, both of you still wouldn't receive funding. And so, yeah, if you have any specific questions about co-applicants, reach out to me, but it is important to know that they need to be on your application in order to be involved in the fellowship.
Code, there's a question about stipend as well that might, it says, is the stipend reported as a stipend alone to the person or to the company? That stipend, my understanding is it goes to the founder, right, who was selected.
Yes, it goes to the founder. I think if you, and Eva, you can correct me, if you wanted to redirect that to your company, I think that could happen. But primarily it goes to the founder.
I want to double check that, Carla, actually, and maybe our fellows
Can I
because I thought it was different. Yeah, because I think we actually
because I know
give it to the company,
I know the answer.
Right? Yeah. Okay, great.
So if you're a non-US citizen, then it doesn't go to the founder. Normally, it goes to the founder because the idea is that even if your company is if your company idea doesn't work, you still have the money as a salary to move on. However, if you're a non-US citizen, there is a taxation problem here, whereas you cannot get an educational stipend because you're officially then whatever visa you're on, unless you're on a J1 in Berkeley, where you can get it to the person. That's why Anindita and Miguel just could get it as a person, because they probably were still in a university cycle and on an officially educational visa at the time. They could get it in person. If you're on an H1B or anything else, then it needs to go as a grant to the company. However, there is a clause, like the contract says, that the money that goes as a grant to the company needs to be paid out in specific amounts to the Activate fellow to make sure that you cannot use the money for anything else. So don't think that, yeah, I can get the grant and then I pay it out for something else. You have to pay it to the person as the Activate fellow as a salary.
So as you can tell, there's a lot of nuances for each individual situation, I think, is the answer to that question. But Flores, that was super helpful. I really appreciate you jumping in there. This is why we start early, and we're happy that you all have joined us to answer your questions on this. Any other questions for the group?
Can I just follow up on that previous one? Like, so after what she was saying, the money can go to the company and the company can pay as a salary to me, but I cannot be employed with the, or like the visa status is aside from these logistics.
Yeah, so you have to show Activate that you're actually employed by the company. And as soon as you can show Activate that you're employed by the company, Activate knows you have a working permit, because else you couldn't be employed by the company, and that's when you get the Activate money. You won't get the Activate money before.
So I need to have the visa, like whatever visa it is, it needs to be with the company. There needs to be like some portion of the visa with the company.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so it can be like the concurrent H-1Bs, but there needs
Correct.
to be the portion from the company / academic. That can be a combination, but there should be that assurance to the Activate program.
Yes, correct. You, even if you're an O1 or H-1B or anything, it needs to be like, there needs to be something that shows you were with the company. Activate will probably not like pay the grant money to any university to get you on, like to just get you paid through that.
Right, but there needs to be like a full salary, like some salary, not just like, oh, I'm involved with the company. There needs to be a salary.
No. So basically what happens, the way these contracts are normally set up is that there is a grant that goes to the company, and in that grant contract, it says the total amount of dollars is X, and the company will use that amount grant money for a salary of Y for X for that person. And that way, you basically, by taking the money as a company, you are bound to pay it as a salary to a specific person.
Okay, so if it's like a startup that is like growing and doesn't have any employment set, there needs to be like some resolution by May, for example, like where there is already some reporting for a salary for the founder.
So you definitely, yes. So you need to have an incorporated company. Whereas if you are a US citizen, you don't need an incorporated company. However, this company can anything. It doesn't need to do much. It needs to do like something. So yes, there is some kind of a chicken and egg issue, because you have to have the company that can then go around and employ you. However, just like to calm you down, you don't need to have everything in place by May so that you can start in June. Normally you have, like, they give you a couple of months until like 3 months, like, to figure it out. So then the Activate team works with you in these 3 months to make sure that everything is set up correctly. And so you just need to have a plan by May or June.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, you can start a bit later. Don't worry about that.
Thanks.
No, there are no previous applications online for a reference.
Yep. Perfect.
On the website, on the activate.org/apply, there is a recorded workshop on how to submit a good application. So if you're interested in more details on that, I can try to find the link before this closes.
We'll also be having another one, since we're plugging it now anyway. This Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, there will be a How to Write a Strong Application webinar for anyone that would like to attend. We'll drop the sign up link in the chat in a moment.
So does the company have to be a US incorporated company then, or can it be a Canadian company that's getting the grant and paying the salary?
My understanding, it has to be incorporated in the United States. Unless, yeah, I mean, for this program, that's the case.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question here, please. So for F1 students, like students on F1 visa, we are not allowed to gain any money beyond campus. Like legally, I can't get any money from any work except if it's like on-campus work. So how does that work with this? I will be on OPT, like STEM, 3 years OPT. Any hints here?
STEM OPT should be fine. But you should be, the sponsor should not be the university. It should, I don't know if the university can be a partial sponsor, but like what happened in my case was the company became the host, like it was transferred. I had to do I had to change the host, and from the university, it was the company. And that was fine with Activate. So you can't, I don't think you can avail the fellowship when you are on F1 visa, but if you're on OPT or STEM OPT, it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. And Harry, I see your question. Do you need to get a visa before the application, or is it the other way around? You do not need to have a visa by October 31st, which is the application deadline, but you should start working on a plan on how you're going to obtain your visa so that we can work with you through the application and selection process to figure out what your plan is to have that for the duration of the fellowship. Looks like there's a question about, does this fellowship have a solicitation document like for other NSF proposal calls?
No, we do not.
Perfect. And then there's a question about sharing the lawyers that you talked to. I got help from. Are we able to share that out or put that anywhere? It's just people to talk to.
Yeah, I'll suggest. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carla.
No, I was just going to say that Activate does not have a approved list of lawyers to navigate this. But if anyone wants to recommend their personal, anyone they've worked with, that's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can suggest Fragomen. It's a firm, so maybe you can reach out.
Great. So I think we're almost out of time. I think the rest of these questions we'll follow up with through our own email, but I wanted to just thank our panelists for their time and for sharing your experience and providing so many insightful words of wisdom. And thank you all for attending today and for the great questions. Again, if you have any further questions or we did not get to yours today, please email us at apply@activate.org and someone will get back to you with an answer. And don't forget, the applications close on October 31st. So please make sure that you submit before then and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Good luck,
everyone.
everyone.